All right, hey everybody, welcome to our webinar. We're going to talk about how to get to the next steps or how to become a security first MSP. And I think it's something important to mention that this is a constant journey. This isn't something that we all say, "Hey, we got there. Woo, we did it. We're already there. I've become a security first MSP." I think this battle is ongoing. It's something that we should constantly be evolving with and learning from. And if anybody says they're done, then they may be done in more ways than they know. I think we have to constantly evolve and trek down this journey. And so we have three MSPs here who are in different iterations of their journeys, maybe serving different customers, the whole stretch. So first, let's start by talking to these three gentlemen we have on the panel. And Bryan, you're first up on my screen, so the Brady Bunch screen. So Bryan, we'll let you introduce first.
Perfect. So Bryan Luce, I run all of operations within Avatar Managed Services. So Avatar's actually been around for a long time and started with, smaller customers, right? And so that's just kind of the way most start. And as we expand our skill set and things like that, we start working up the stack and having larger customers. And so, security is a constant change. As we bring in like greener staff and talent, like we still have to train, we still have to implement, and it's just as much human process as it is, technology and using, those services. So, that Avatar's been around for a while, and we're just kind of reinventing ourselves and bringing in more larger customers that, have regulations and stuff like that. But, and we're out of Houston, Texas.
Nice. Thanks, Bryan. Appreciate it. Joshua, you're up next.
Yeah, I'm Joshua Van Berkum. I'm a VP of the IT division for Fisher's Technology. We're based out of Boise, Idaho. We have 14 locations throughout the four-state area, Utah, Idaho, Montana, and Washington. Fisher's has been around since like selling typewriters in the 30s. So if we want to underscore how this is a journey, like that's about as much of a technology journey as you can have. I feel we're very much on that journey as we're trying to grow. We're about 8 million. We'd like to diversify our client base in other cities, and it is really difficult to do. So we are very much still on and in that journey.
Nice. Fantastic. Good to see you, Joshua. And last but definitely not least, Justin.
Hi, I'm Justin Nevins with OXEN Technology. We're based out of Harlan, Iowa. We have locations across Iowa, Missouri, and Kansas, 5 locations. Formerly used to be HTS, rebranded in 2016. And so we're kind of on this journey of not only becoming a new company from a brand standpoint that we went through all that, and then also having to reinvent ourselves a little bit, first from being a VAR to being a managed service provider, and then from being a managed service provider to really being focused on security and leading our clients in kind of whatever comes next, being that proactive, trusted kind of security leader for them. So we've made a lot of transitions over the years. Definitely have a long history. Some of that means you have to get over your long history and make changes according to what the market needs and what your clients need. So we've done a lot of that, made a lot of mistakes along the way, and really have had some good successes as well. So
Awesome. Well, and I'll just do a quick intro to me. For those of you who don't know, Ken Patterson, Director of Community at Todyl. My history is fairly long. I still call myself an MSP because I did it for so long. I was doing the MSP thing before it was called MSP. And you all know we can have a long conversation about the whole MSP tag and, how it really doesn't mean as much as we would like it to mean for some. But been doing this for a really long time. And like Justin, I made a lot of mistakes and I learned from those mistakes. And that's what kind of propelled me through the MSP space. I took 3 or 4 MSPs from sub 500,000 to 7 million or beyond in my career on the MSP side. And then I joined the dark side by coming over to PAX 8 back in 2017, I believe it was, and grew their community to a fairly large amount before going out and trying to find some other fit, and then made a stop or two, and then ended up at Total and realized that there was something special about what Total is doing and how they want to approach the community side. While the tools are really cool and they work really well, it's more about the people and how they want to support the community now and step into the community that got me here. So for me, done all the MSP stuff, love it. Really still say I believe that we're super important in the space. And I think this is important. And just so everybody that's watching this understands, this is for you. So ask questions. If you're watching this back, reach out to these three panelists, reach out to myself, reach out to Total, and just get questions answered if you have them. This is really about helping you. We want to talk about the stories that impacted these three gentlemen, and then also see if they connect with some stories that you have to maybe help you get through your journey. So that's really where we're directed with this. And Justin, since we're talking about those mistakes, I'm going to start with you because we had a conversation, I believe it was yesterday, and I felt like it hit home for me because everybody thinks that this security journey is either the pros got it over here, and then there's the people that just don't know how to do it over here, and it's a beeline. And we all know that it's not a beeline, right? We all have different iterations. And you had made a comment like, oh, maybe I'm not as qualified to be in a conversation with certain people on the call, right? And I think that's cool because I think all of us were thinking that about ourselves. And I think you're the one that said it. So from a standpoint of that, like, just quickly, obviously don't have to go into detail. Talk about the fact that, you hit some hard points during this journey and now you're on the right track. How did you get to that point? What were some decisions that you made that got you there so that people watching can maybe say, hey man, I can do this too?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think in some ways that's everyone's story. When you get on these webinars and it's like we see people, all we hear is kind of the path upward. And it's like oftentimes very easy to leave out the hard stuff. But the hard stuff is maybe the stuff that will connect most with people. It's the stuff that helps people to get through the issues that they're going through. So, from our perspective, OXEN is, as I said, a rebranded company. Used to be Heartland Technology Solutions. Everybody knew that name in our industry. It was kind of like, it was like famous at that point. I kind of came into it after that point, so I wasn't real familiar. But over the years began to kind of get a picture of what HTS was and what it meant to people. But then we went and kind of like wiped that out and started off again as OXEN. And so now we're rebuilding kind of our internal identity that has had some ups and downs. You have to realign to what you're trying to accomplish. And sometimes that involves people, which, as all I'm sure, people are messy, and you make mistakes along the way. You have conflict with different individuals. You find out that you're not as smart as you thought you were in the decisions that you make. And ultimately, I think for us, we had a lot of challenges from the standpoint of just things that were changing in our company prior to the rebranding and trying to reinvent ourselves. And we were having to live with those. When I took over leading our service team, I came into finding out that we were about to get rid of one of our locations. We were actually selling it off, which was a good thing for aligning us with where we were headed. But while it was a good thing for us in the long term, it was a painful thing in the short term, right? And so we had key people that were actually going with the other company, and we had structures that had to be completely wiped out and started over. We had a high reliance on specific individuals who had a lot of knowledge, but it was all siloed in them. And so we had to work through those things one thing at a time and figure out, how do we navigate even just our internal stuff, but not just pay attention to the turmoil within. I mean, which is important. You have to pay attention to that. You have to fix those things.
Right.
But to turn that around and start focusing on our customers and trying to figure out like, how do we lead them? Because they're the ones that are, having to worry about getting breached. They're the ones who are out there in the trenches and worried about how they're going to make payroll, how they're going to continue to be competitive. And so it's for us to help them with those challenges. I feel like that's a heavy responsibility. So I don't know if I answered your question there, but
you definitely did, and a lot of strong points. And Bryan knows because he's done a panel with me live. I would hug you right now because I think that it's important what you said. It's very important to focus on the people you serve, right? And I think sometimes MSPs are stuck in the middle. They put high demands on the vendors who serve them, but they don't put those same high demands. They don't take those things and focus them on their customers, right? And they have expectations of the vendors, but they don't realize their customers have those expectations of them. So it's nice to hear that you're focused on that because it's 100% accurate. You have to focus on the people you serve and how to best help them the same way that you want to turn around and say, the things that you want your customers to ask of you and do with you, you have to turn around and do the same thing with vendors. So it's a very interesting setup for, how that works and connecting those dots. And for Bryan and Josh, I'm going to lean into you guys and kind of mix that, right? So, Justin hit on some pretty key points there, but it's not a perfect road. It's very difficult to do. So I want both of you to talk about, I'll narrow it down a little bit because we could have a 2-hour session here if we really go deep. But for you two, what was that one? Everybody talks about the good stuff, to Justin's point. What was that one really bad incident that happened in your life that made a huge positive outcome on the other side of it, right? Something that hit you hard, but then you realized if that hadn't happened, I wouldn't have been able to do these positive things in the future.
Yeah, I'll take that on first. What's interesting is I got started with an MSP that focused on banking, right? And so if you think of even banks at a small size, they are audited and examined from the OCC in the same way as larger banks, right? And they know financial risk, reputational risk very early. And so for my journey, I got to experience that really focused up front and very small, to recently working with enterprises and then being able to kind of bring it back down. And so speaking auditor and risk and compliance is like a different language, right? And so when you come up just from a tech perspective, or like when we're bringing on new hires and we're training them on the tech and training them on security, it's a different language. It's not just a tool, and I think we're really we've been trained and we have felt like we just buy tools, but this is so much more than a tool. And when we're small, we want to feel large. And when we're large, honestly, we want to feel small. And so when we're small, we feel like we're going to white label, right? Like I'm going to take a Todyl and say it's Avatar, right? This is us. And we have a SOC and, it's spread out when really we're small. But now I think the white labeling is going away. I don't really like it. And so what I do is like, hey, let me introduce you to Ken with Todyl. Like he's my trusted partner, and this is how we go about it. And we rely on them, and then we pull them into those customer conversations. So it's a we conversation versus just a whole bunch of finger pointing that just it doesn't work. It doesn't work at all.
Got it, Josh.
I think like the recent experiences for me would be, there's pressure to grow, there's pressure to expand. That's an organizational goal that I've inherited, and I lean into that. But as you expand into rural markets, your available prospects are not the same as you would find in your metropolitan areas, right? So zero trust is probably not something to sell in a location where they'll tell you that a handshake still means something around here, right? It's just there can be an alignment issue. Particularly if that strategy is around acquisition in an area. That sounds okay. Let's look for someone to buy. Let's buy them. Their clients probably don't look like yours, and you can't necessarily just walk in the door and say, "Hey, security is really important." That there's always been an alignment issue for me. If a client's data isn't important to them, I need to try to educate them as to why it should be important. But if I can't do that, I can't sell them security services that they don't want to buy, and I can't afford to give it to them. So that's probably the the biggest struggle that we've probably had as part of that as an organization that wants to grow. You know, P&L alignment is one thing when you're making decisions, but security stack and client maturity and making sure that the organization that you're looking at purchasing looks more like you and their clients look more like you is far more important than necessarily how profitable they are.
Interesting. And it's so there you go. There's some three different perspectives here. So it's awesome. And I love that we were able to do that. And Bryan, you know, you said something interesting about the white labeling, but you know, the same thing that works for you may not work for another MSP in a different situation, right? So there's these different takes on it. And that's something I want to drive home is don't feel like, well, first of all, anybody that tells you this is the only way to do it, you should probably reevaluate the person you're talking to because this is done so many different ways and don't stick to those people. And being an MSP is not easy. If it was, everybody would do it. And it even tests the fortitude of people who are doing it. We all have our crazy moments, right? It pushes us over the edge. So finding what works for you is important. Getting nuggets of information from different people who are in different locations, serving different verticals can still be information you can use if you change it up and use those nuggets of information. So just some notes out there, things that helped me grow my MSP that I would have never done on my own. People like, oh, how'd you do it? Yeah, I'm a genius. No, I listened to other people. I took things from other people and I used those things in my business and how it worked in my geo. I happen to be in Boston area. It's a crazy, you could throw a rock and hit MSP in any one direction in Boston. It's just flooded with MSPs. So I had to differentiate myself but I didn't do that by castling myself in and not talking to them. I talked to them all. Well, at least the ones that would talk to me, right? And I learned and we tried to figure out, and I actually partnered with some of those people. So just be open-minded when you're going through this process. So first question for you, when did cybersecurity become part of your managed stack? And you don't have to give you the exact timing, but from a standpoint of when in your journey did you decide I got to put security into my managed stack, or have you yet? Are you still is that a separate thing? So Joshua, I'll start with you.
Originally I had an MSP for 18 years and tried to sell right before we had to do all this stuff. So, but I'm back in it now. So, I would say because of our expansion, we are still we have some clients, you know, I still have a P&L sheet to run. So we are still going through the process of sorting our verticals a little bit better and starting to focus. So we probably do have the mess that a lot of MSPs have. And it kind of reminds me of like the BDR days where like, we're going to do backup and disaster recovery. And a year later, you have like 5 BDR solutions you're trying to support, right? So I think that alignment, it takes time. And a lot of it is educating your clients and making sure that you're in verticals that value security. And if they don't, you probably got to look at getting out of those verticals. So we are constantly working on that.
100%. And maybe not the whole vertical and depending upon what your outcome is, but you're 100% right. Remember, back in the day, this liability wasn't on our shoulders. Right. Now this liability is there, and you cannot afford to take a customer who doesn't value what you do and puts you in a liable situation. So it sucks because remember, Josh, in those situations, I'm taking every client I can, right? But you can't do that anymore because they have to value what you do, or else they're not going to take any of your advice and they're not going to take care of the security issues that are going to keep them from being liable. So it's just, you know, it's the old days of writing something up that said, here, you're doing this against medical advice or against technical advice or whatever you want to say. That doesn't work. You can talk to Brad Gross about that from a legal perspective. It doesn't work.
And
you know?
and what do you do if you buy an MSP that has a 3-year obligation to someone who doesn't value it, right? So these are real world problems that you have to deal with. Yeah.
Yep, 100%. So you have to find ways to, at the very least, it was like the old, remember when the WISP first came out, the written information security policy? When that first came out, people panicked. Oh my God, what are we going to do? We have to get everybody doing these things. No, it was about best efforts.
Yeah.
So as long as you have a plan in place and you took on those 3-year clients and you said, hey, sorry, they were doing this. There were some things here that weren't done properly. We need to get you from here to here. And here's your plan for this. As long as that plan is written and in place and you're showing progress, that's the one way you can get, you know, maybe mitigate some of that risk, right? But just sitting back on it or having them sign something doesn't do anything.
I kind of feel it's sort of the cyclical nature of our industry, right? Like way back, we were block time and selling hours, and then managed service came, and we had to, educate and preach to our clients the value of that. And then we did it again with backup. And now we're really kind of going through that whole thing again, right? It's just with security this time.
Yeah, and I think it's important to remember that a lot of times this is, I mean, you asked about when we started doing security. It's all an evolution, right? I mean,
Right.
we were all doing firewalls years ago,
Yep.
before we considered that security, right? And at one point, that was security. And it was like, we thought that was security. And then you add on there, oh, well, now we have to have AV, and then we need next gen AV. And now it's, EDR and MDR and XDR. And so it all evolves. I think the recognition, sometimes it helps to recognize you're already kind of doing this to some degree. You just, what you've got to do is bring it a little further. And like Josh was saying, recognize that there are going to be verticals where that's going to be a whole lot easier. And there are going to be, I would say maybe even as important, client profiles. Sometimes you can meet somebody and okay, this person gets it. And then other times you meet somebody and you're like, ooh, this is going to be a rough one, right?
I want to jump off that. So you said something really interesting. So in the early days, we came at it from a technical perspective, right? Hey, you need this tech. And as security has evolved into cybersecurity and threats, it's a whole different conversation. And we've said it a few times, it's about risk. It's risk for the customer, which they're learning that they're not, that these threat actors are not just attacking the big companies. They're now attacking the small companies, and they know someone or they've had a personal scare and things like that. And so, an illusion I like to talk with customers is, before we had M&M security, hard outside, soft in the middle, and there's really nothing. And today it has to be like a big jawbreaker. You remember those good days you're looking through a jawbreaker and it has the different colors on the inside. So it has to be hard throughout the whole stack. And so some of us still have M&M security, right? And so being able to help customers understand the hardening throughout your org is the only way to go from a risk-based approach, or, it'll happen. It'll happen sometime soon. Somebody will click something, and then you have to get the FBI involved. And that is such a big disruption to the business when you have to kind of shut down and freeze out. And those are the really, really hard events that are the wake-up calls for smaller organizations to accept the cost of additional security.
So we've mentioned education a few times. We talked about the end users, the customers. So what have your struggles been getting, talking to these end users and these prospects and getting them to understand, what it is that they need, right? Just my quick analogy on this, and you guys can relate, is I always wondered why as an MSP. Well, I knew why, because we were like used car salesmen back in the day, right? We were selling tech, like you said, Bryan, boom, 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 buy this, buy that, and never really talking about their business and how it affects their business and the business needs, and then wrap the tech around it. But when I go to the doctor and my doctor tells me that I'm overweight, I have high blood sugar, I have high blood pressure, and then he holds out his hand and says, "These are the pills you want to take," I don't go, I'll just take the white one. Right? But we allow our customers to do that to us as MSPs. And so I think the shift, and it's starting to happen because I listened to the three of you, the shift needs to be more prescriptive. We need to educate, right? And we need to be prescriptive. Hey, just like a doctor, I'm going to evaluate your second most important thing in your life, your livelihood. And we're going to see where the holes are. And this is what you need to fix it. It's the same thing, but we don't seem to take it as an industry to that level. So for you all, what are the struggles that you're having doing just that? What are you doing to convince, and not even convince, just, get them to understand why it's so important, right? Bryan, I'll start with you.
Wow. Yeah, where do you start? I mean, it's a really hard struggle and journey. I think for us, well, the prescriptive approach is different. A lot of times we let our customers define our solutions. And if you think of other service industries, this is what we provide. Like think of like a SaaS provider, right? This is what we provide. If you ask for things, we'll put it on the feature request list. However, traditionally, we just had vendors, we had tech, we had, and so that makes it really hard and cost sprawl for us. And so I have constantly had this internal challenge, not necessarily just with our customers, of who we are going to market to, who we are going to allow be our customers. And it's really, really hard to say no to new revenue. And it's even harder to let go of existing customers because they are too much of a risk for you to continue as is and not adopt any security and really push back because they're also accepting the business risk themselves. And so that's the constant challenge on who we bring in, but you almost have to you have to let the customer say, do you want to subscribe to us or not? If you want to do a lower security, higher risk approach, we're not your fit. And we have to tell them no.
Yeah, I think that's an important point. Is it's not so much that you're saying every company needs this level with all these layers. Blah, 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 blah. It's that you recognize what you're going to do for your customers, who your ideal customer is, and what exactly they need from a risk management standpoint. Because a small manufacturing firm in the Midwest who has like 6 staff needs something very, very different from a 100-person office in a city. I mean, and depending on their industry, maybe vastly different. If they're highly regulated, if they're in banking or whatever, you're going to have a much greater need there than you will in the manufacturing place. But there's just a recognition. Yes, it's a risk management conversation for them, and it's cost versus risk versus like flexibility. And you have to take all those things into the customer has to take those things into consideration. But you as a MSP, if you're looking to serve a specific customer profile, you've got to know what that is first. You've got to identify who is that customer profile that we're going after and narrow it. So, if this is kind of the ideal person or the ideal company and it matches all these different criteria, well, you can have a range of who you're going to talk to, and it's right around that, right? So it's like, well, I may be able to have a conversation and get them there. But if they're way down here, no way. And it's not worth it. You're just going to spend a ton of time trying to get them to care about things that aren't relevant to them.
Man, my brain hurts. We could go on for hours. Josh, what's your take on this? And then I already have some really good stuff out of that.
For an existing client base or a client base that you acquired, the start of that conversation, I recommend is to start with cybersecurity liability insurance, right? Whatever industry they're in, there's probably hopefully some sort of compliance that they need for that. 12, 14 years ago, you could get cybersecurity insurance for peanuts. And we used to just fill out the sheet form because nobody knew what it was, and it cost them $1,000 and they were done. It's a very different conversation today. It's very tough to get. So that kind of, for an existing client, can give them a roadmap to get them to where they need to get, and we can take it off in bite-sized chunks. If they don't want to do that, then we may need to consider moving them to an off board whenever their agreement is done. And much like Justin said, you almost have to try to actively disqualify prospects, right? We know who we need. We know what they need to value. If they don't value that, if they don't care about their data, how can I? So yeah, I would agree with that. But I think cybersecurity liability insurance is a wonderful tool to use for existing clients in particular.
Yikes. You guys are just blowing my mind. This is good stuff. This is 100% accurate. And this is really where we want to dive into. So many things to touch on there. There is a shameless plug coming in because there's a question about Todyl, but I'll wait for 1 second on that because of all you just said. First of all, ICP. I mean, how many MSPs are actually looking at their ideal client profile, right? Ideal customer profile. It's important to have that figured out before you go out and look. How do you know what you're looking for if you don't define that, right? And this is something as an MSP that I struggled with, right? When I first started, I was a tech. I just wanted to fix stuff, right? And I didn't realize there was all these other things like operations, sales, marketing, finance. Just thinking about it makes my head explode. And the one thing I always recommend to people, it's never too late. Never too late to go back to this beginning and start over from a standpoint of your company. Figure out who you are, what you do, and who you serve.
Mm-hmm.
Define those things, right? Find your why. Or there's a number of different ways to put it, but it's all around the same thing. If you don't have a definition of those things, how do you go out and attack the market? Well, I know how. We just attack everybody, and we hope we catch fish with a net, right? And that doesn't mean you're going to get fish in there that you don't like, right? Or aren't going to work for you. And I think that when you guys talked about this, that ideal customer profile is important. Also, how about operational maturity level? Right? Figuring out your own maturity level so you know where to go and get help from a standpoint of it at the MSP space, but you can apply that to customers as well, end users. What's their operational? Well, are they looking to grow? Are they having issues with growth? Do they want to grow? I said, do you want to grow first in a different way? But anyway, being able to figure those things out are a big deal. And Joshua, to your point, the problem of, buying a chunk of business like that and then having to worry about offboarding them. You ever read the book, The Pumpkin Plan? Go Justin, check it out. The Pumpkin Plan is a great way of categorizing your customers in a certain way, A, B, C, whatever, you grade them. And then the bottom ones go into a list of a plan, some kind of plan of how you're going to offboard them. And the basis is for every 2 new clients I get, one of those can go. Right. Mm-hmm. And by the way, you don't have to let them go. But what I did was, and I'm again, a lot old school from back in the day, but I used to go to them and just say, hey, I apologize. Over the years, we haven't raised our rates, and we have to change things. And I'd hit them with a 40% raise that I knew if they stayed, it's going to be worth keeping them. But if they didn't, there was a reason for them to go. And I'd also find them someone. Believe it or not, I connected them with another MSP and got them helped out. So there's ways to do it without it seeming like, hey, we're just dumping you. It's, you can do it's not you, it's me, right? We've grown in different directions, whatever it may be. But finding ways to do that will allow you to make that process happen faster. And at least you have a plan in place, right? Okay, by the end of the year, this X amount of these clients will either be offboarded or be in the right plan. And that's usually the way that kind of helps drive that. But man, I'll tell you, the conversation here is like so spot on. It hits home for me because I remember going through all these iterations and just, again, stumbling through it. There was not one thing I ever did where I was like, I came up with the idea and I'm like, yeah, man, I got this. It never happens that way. It always happens through conversations like this. And, that's why I always advise people, talk to your peers. You're going to learn. You're going to find things that you can try. Okay, so the question, because you guys were talking a lot about Justin brought it up about you don't have to do it all. So the question that came up was, how is it for you all that use Todyl? How did that help you in that field? Because Todyl's modular, right? You don't have to buy all the pieces. You can pick the pieces you need and use the pieces you need. So the question was, for you all, how has that helped you?
Perfect. I'll take that one first. I think what's neat about how the market is changing is before we would buy software and services and just kind of plug it in. What's neat is I can't build a SOC as a small company. I can't purchase all those tools. I can't monitor all of those incidents, alerts, to get it down to here's the real thing that I need to have my guys focus on to make the change and awareness. You talk about kind of the journey of the grand fair prize of the pumpkin, right? You've got to start with, pruning your existing customer base, pruning who you're going after and have your eye on the prize. But then, Mike Knockowicz starts with, you have to start with the best seed, right? And so we can today reinvest in our business and start over and do that with the best customers and prune and grow and then have that large pumpkin as the prize on the end. But the way that we address that is when you have new companies coming to the table, making enterprise software so much attainable for us and our customers, that is the best thing that's happening within the market is you've got these enterprise individuals building these tools into something that we can sell small, like Justin, you called out about a customer that's like 6 people, right? And being able to, as a service provider, I can service them with sometimes the same amount of technology and cybersecurity protection that I can with these large customers. because of how Total operationalized the security and made it lower cost while still having a SOC, right? Still being able to provide those services. And that's our advantage today. And that's the advantage of customers today purchasing from an MSP and purchasing from a provider, because they can build out a SOC, yet alone we can't when we're that small.
Don't you just add an S to MSP and you're automatically an MSSP? Sorry, that's just
I'll fight you on
Evidently,
that every day.
evidently.
Vanna, can I buy a vowel? Justin and Joshua, you have a similar story for that?
So a couple of things. So if we are looking to acquire in other markets, there's going to be some clients that you just have to give them some of your stack without them knowing, so that you sleep a little bit better at night. So it's nice to be able to at least get them on some minimum stack. But for me, it's more about, like, our engineers are just decimated by the amount of portals that they have to be in to do their job.
Right.
And so I'm kind of the guy, like, I've been in peer teams for years to help grow my MSP, and still am, even with Fishers. And the conversation eventually devolves into tools, and it's just, we're constantly jumping from tool to tool. And I realize it's not the tools that matter, it's the partnership that you have with that vendor. So that's big on me. But also, we didn't want our techs to have to, you can miss something jumping from portal to portal. So just to be able to have a full solution stack from a portal is invaluable to me.
Yeah, I mean, if we're talking about what, the tools that we use, we're really in a better place now as an industry than we've ever been. I think to Bryan's point, that there was a time where you just had to have you switched out the tools all the time. You had to have a bunch of different ones, and you always had to worry about if that vendor's going to get purchased. And your support's going to go to crap for 2 years until they get their stuff sorted out. I mean, that's been our story over and over again, switching tools. I think the focus on what is the solution we want to provide first, and then figuring out, like, who's the best partner that we're going to partner with to be able to deliver this in a way that makes sense from a cost perspective, that makes sense from a capability perspective. For us, that was Total. And I think we've done a lot, across our entire stack, to try to figure out, okay, how do we best utilize this tool, kind of coming at it from the other end. How do we best utilize this tool in what we've already decided is important? So, speaking to the customer who, you want to get them on, I remember back when we went from next gen AV to wanting EDR on everything. And it was like that transition was kind of hard, because it was like, this is way more expensive. And, you can go to the customer and say, hey, we have this new thing. Or you can just say, it's the right thing for our customers. This is how they need to be protected. You insert that tool, and then you have to figure out, like, okay, now we need to raise rates. And that's a hard thing to do, because some people are like, well, I was fine with the old stuff. And it's like, well, I know that wasn't protecting you. I mean, it was missing everything. And so sometimes it's a matter of, and that's a matter of risk management for us. We can't afford for them to not be protected and us be the ones who are on the hook if something goes wrong, right? So we all have to look at it that way, I think.
Yeah. That's a fantastic point. And you're right. What's the best way to go to a client and say, hey, the tools we were putting in place for you before were good then, but they're not good now. And I think that comes with the education piece. If you're constantly educating your partners, customers, whatever you want to call them, even your prospects, on the ever-changing landscape, they're more likely to understand why there's a cost increase. And people do it in different ways. I've seen people do, they have contracts, and the only thing they have built into the contracts is an increase due to tool changes, things that they need, like not just any tool. We're not jumping ship and putting a documentation tool in and charging the customers more, but for tools that are necessary so that they can do that. And I've seen people eat the charge, let them know about it ahead of time, talk about it, and then say, when the contract renews, we're going to be going to this. Now, again, it all depends on how you're set up in that process, how well you're pricing in the first place so that you can do those types of things. And that's a whole other conversation, right? Talking about pricing and why you need to build in some buffers for these types of things when they happen, so you can survive 6 months of a change in price that you're going to deliver, and and after the 6 months contract is up. But it's all about those upfront contracts, and it's all about educating, making sure that your customers and prospects understand the reasons why things are going to change, that these things are, it's inevitable. Things are going to change, and we're going to constantly be, that's why you have us. We're constantly watching this so you don't have to. And unfortunately, sometimes there'll be a cost associated with that. Right. I mean, I feel like if that's, that's the biggest piece. And obviously it's not easy because we know some of these customers can be difficult. But if you're going down that road of getting customers that are more, that value what you do, the conversation becomes easier.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the customer challenges is when they say, well, why isn't it covering everything? I thought you were already protecting me, and so it's when you can talk to them outside of tech and like you say, well, how is your business changing? What is the risk landscape? How are your customers changing and things like that? Then making that parallel as it relates to the threat landscape changing, because when you throw out a lot of these words, it's really hard when you're trying to educate them. And I joked around with one company that we had, and they had down here in Houston, right? We have a lot of oil refineries and oil and gas companies. And like, if you hand me, a welder, and, they've got these pipe fitters and things like that, I'd burn the place down, right? Except hand me an Excel spreadsheet and I can make it sing and dance, tell a story. But we need each other to really, progress and have a good, strong economy and things like that. But if I hand a spreadsheet to a welder, they're gonna like, what do you want me to do with this? And so oftentimes IT is perceived as a checkbox. And we're making it easier like that, where IT can be somewhat of a checkbox, but they still expect that that's the checkbox we checked 10 years ago is the same thing that is going to work in 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You always have to find some analogy that they can relate to. Right. I always try to look at their business and see what's the most important thing in their business, and then say, what if that failed? What would that cost? And then go down that road. Oh, it would cost you $10,000 a month if you lost your production line. Well, crap, I'm only going to charge you $5,000 a month to protect it. Right. So being able to have relatable stories around their business helps greatly. And being able to just, and again, being genuine and upfront about what we do is seems like it's the hardest thing to do, especially as technical people for the most part, and from an MSP perspective. And I think it's the easiest shift to make, because that's what people relate to, right? I think that MSPs relate to vendors who are more genuine, right, and have a direct link and really do want to help. And I think that trickles down to the customers. And I think one thing to remind people of is that, remember, it took a really long time, and it took COVID to finally say that MSPs are first responders. Yeah. Think about that. And that's how we have to look at ourselves. MSPs are first responders. Think the totality of someone losing their business, that's their livelihood. So second to saving someone's life from a health perspective is saving their business, their livelihood, right? And you're not just saving theirs, you're saving every employee that works there, all the people they serve. So it's a big, heavy job. And I think that's it got out there a bit, right? COVID brought it to the forefront and said, hey, we're finally recognizing these people as first responders. But I think we all have to do a better job of educating the marketplace on just exactly what it is we're doing, right? Mm-hmm. We're protecting their livelihood. Same way a doctor protects our health when we listen to them, right? Mm-hmm. We all know what happens when we don't. And it's the same thing with your business.
Yeah.
So
most business people have selective memories for that stuff. So they remember that you're critical after you've had the conversation, but right. Once they get their next bill, they're forgetting about that. Once they're starting to look at ways they can cut, then they forget about that. So kind of going back to the analogy, trying to help them to see the criticality of it. People oftentimes are like, well, why do I need to replace this switch? It's like, well, it's 10 years old. That should be self-evident, right? But it's not. And part of the way to help them to see that is like, okay, this is like your nervous system. Like everything in your network runs through this thing, and you're just going to wait for it to die like randomly. It's probably, you know, got all these security holes and vulnerabilities that need to be need to be gotten away with. But it's also just critical to your business.
Yeah, and relate that to some place where if that switch went down, how much would it cost them?
Yeah.
Right? Always relate it to money because you know they definitely respond to money and they don't respond to tool talk. Right? Paul Redding said it best to me. He's like, you know what, you know what, customers hear and prospects hear when MSPs talk to them? They hear Charlie Brown's teacher. They hear want money, want money, right? And that's all they hear. But if we're talking about their business problems and we set that expectation up front, it's so much easier to kind of get to. Oh, and by the way, we use this tech stuff back here to fix that. But they don't care about that when you're talking about what keeps you up at night, what are your business problems, and how can technology solve those business problems?
Mm-hmm.
And that's the driving factor. That's where we're going to get to. And by the way, you can weed out a lot of bad prospects that way too. When you start going down that road and you realize, hey, you know what, this isn't going to work out. And I believe it or not, I learned how to walk out of calls, meetings, sitting in a meeting and just be like, oh, you know, Justin, I think we've found out we're not a fit. And I said in the beginning, we'll find out if we're a fit. By the way, even though we're not a fit, I'm going to refer you to a couple MSPs that might help you out. Right. So I'm still giving them something nice on the way out, but I'm not wasting my time talking for an hour and two on something that I know is not going to happen. So it brings me to another point. So we're talking about, we lead with security, right? Because it's the core of everything from a standpoint of, sure, you can take a client on that you're going to, you know, update their computers every month, but what good is it if the security's not straight? You know, you guys have any tips or tricks or ways that you guys are getting out in front of prospects and showing them, you know, why we lead with security? What education are you guys doing for this types of things? Bryan, you're shaking your head, so I'm going to hit you up.
All right, all right. I'm trying not to like talk too much because I've got so much just one of the things, so we rebuilt some of our recent sales communication and things like that.
Mhm.
And so the biggest thing is a journey to maturity, right? And so as we talk through that, I'm making sure that in every slide and every conversation, and it's more about the conversation than a slide deck, but there's a security piece here. There's a security piece there. Like it has to be all throughout the organization and every step. And our journey to maturity as business owners and their journey to maturity, including cybersecurity and protection, is one of the things that we help try to educate them. And we also have to be real about ourselves. And so we share about some of the risks that we've had, some of the failures at other customers and things like that. To help say like the risk is real, right? And it's real for you, it's real for us, and this is a journey, and it's going to take time, and we'll never be done with the journey because like we may get to the top of the mountain, and then we'll go down to the bottom of the mountain, and then we'll go up to another one, you know. And so it's just a constant journey, and everybody's at a different place from a business perspective, from a mentality perspective, and from adoption. Everybody is. I mean, everybody's at a different place in that journey, and let's just go hike together up that mountain together.
I love it. Josh?
The company I work for has a very strong brand. I mentioned that they've been around for coming up on 100 years, which is not typical with technology companies, right? So we have a wonderful marketing team that does a fantastic job. So we actually use education as a mechanism to do that. So we're later on this fall, we're hosting the 3rd annual Idaho Cybersecurity Summit. And
Nice.
it's a pretty large event. But what's really nice is when you host an event like this, as a non-sales, it's educational. You get to be on the marquee, right? So, you know, Boise State University is, you know, everybody's just all involved with this, and you know, the governor is speaking at it and so on. So that kind of sets the stage for us for like our brand to lean in. And are you familiar with the Cybersecurity Summit? So I know everybody probably doesn't have that capability. My MSP, we weren't capable of doing that back in the day, but I still think like educational lunch and learns specific to your verticals. Like we kind of got away from that, I feel, with COVID. And if you're not getting back into doing that, you should start doing that and invite your clients, have friends of clients, prospects come in and just do it as educational because, you know, right next to AI, cybersecurity is still that one thing that brings them all in. And if you have to bridge them, bridge both of them, but get them in talking about their security because they're always looking to learn something to take to their boss or an executive level person and say, hey, we really should consider this.
I love that you lead with education. That's my number one thing. You got to lead with education. A smart buyer is going to buy more and going to buy better, and also that value comes through at that point. Justin, what do you got?
Yeah, I mean, as far as education is concerned, we probably do most of that actually one-on-one with prospects and with clients. I mean, there's a lot of conversations that happen that you know we've had for some clients. It's like, oh, we've had this conversation so many times, and they're finally starting to get it. For others, it takes one time, and it was, you know, the first time you ever interacted with that prospect. And they, you know, they made a comment and you go, oh, actually, that's interesting. Why do you say that? And then you end up talking with them more and kind of realigning the way they think about this. And most of the time, those are relationships that came through some other client, or they came from some trusted source, or they've been someone who's been watching your social media for a long time. They've been watching the things you've been putting out, and they finally decided they're going to call you, and they already see you as the expert, right? But there are sometimes you're having conversations with clients who are just not there. They either don't trust you, or it's some kind of cold call, and so those conversations are very different. It's like you have to take people where they're at and see where you can bring them. So we've taken a very one-on-one kind of approach. I don't know that that's the best. I think that's actually probably something we're moving away from. We're going to continue to do it, but we're hoping to add to that more intentional kind of education. So.
Yeah, expand it. And by the way, a lot of the vendors have great material to help you present without pitching anything.
Yep.
You know, what you want to do is you want to give the stats and the facts, what's going on in the industry, what's happening around the world, and then say, oh, by the way, if you need help, we can do that. What I used to do too, that was very helpful, is I had a checklist. Create a checklist of the things they should have from their existing IT support. We know there's a lot of bad actors out there in this particular field. We know that. So, and again, truth be told, all we're trying to do is make sure everybody's protected, right? Sure, we have businesses to run, but at the end of the day, we don't want customers or prospects that aren't going to do the right things. But the ones that are out there that are kind of on the fence, the best way to put it out there is, hey, Bryan, look, here's a checklist. These are some things that your people should be doing right now. If they are, great. Now we know you're okay. If they're not, you may want to ask some questions. If you ever have to ask a question of me, I'm always here for you, right? Make it so non-sales pitchy that they're going to be, wait a minute, they gave this to me for nothing. It's a checklist, and holy crap, my IT person doesn't do half these things, or hasn't asked me half these questions. That'll kind of also vet out the bad actors that are in the field that aren't even trying or attempting to talk to them about security, which they should be, because the liabilities are only getting worse, right? So finding ways, and Justin, to your point, look, we talked about it earlier. There is no right way to do this other than ethically and genuinely. Separate from that, there's 1,000 different ways to do the MSP thing. One-on-one is great, but I do believe you need to expand that. Do things like Josh is, you can maybe work your way up to what Josh is doing out in his area, but go to those Rotary meetings, because you can't speak business, but you can educate, and the people in the room will start to realize, holy crap, this person's not trying to pitch me, they're just helping me, and I don't have someone to do this. That starts to point people your way. Also, it's the perfect storm. Get yourself out there wherever anybody will take it. News stations were all over the whole CrowdStrike thing, right? They were asking local IT people to come on the news and just talk about it. Hey, what is this? How did this happen, right? Try to get connections with the news people. Try to get connections with that. Wrap your vehicles. I had 2 vehicles. One of them was number like 14 and one was number 79. People thought I had, people used to tell me all the time, I see your cars everywhere. Great, yeah. But they
Both of
thought
them.
that I had, yeah, they thought I had multiple cars. And by the way, it doesn't cost anything extra to wrap the roof. And I have a great story around that. One of my guys was driving through Boston. A guy who was frustrated with his IT looked out the window, saw my number and my company name on the top of the roof, and was like, damn this guy. And ended up calling me. It's like, I've been dealing with this problem, and I got an email from you, I got a letter from you, and then I saw your car drive down the street. I figured I had to call.
Yeah.
Right. So getting your stuff out there where you're going to be in the back of their mind, because they're going to throw that letter out, they're going to delete the email. But after a while, when they're dealing with problems, they're going to have to call someone. It's going to be the person that's top of mind. So being able to put yourself top of mind for those people. And then, of course, you have to deliver, set your expectations, and understand and educate around the threats, the things that are happening right now. Well, I think we're coming up on time. Is that true, Mr. Nick?
Yes, sir. We are right at time. It was an exhilarating conversation. I really appreciate you moderating and appreciate all of our panelists' participation. It was very insightful and informative. You can look for Todyl at the Fishers Cybersecurity Summit event that Josh mentioned this fall. We will be their title sponsor, and like Ken was mentioning, we'll be leading with education. It will be vendor agnostic. We're trying to help people understand this stuff, not jam stuff down their throat, right?
Right. And again, thank you, gentlemen, for taking time out of your busy schedules, because we had to have a call and a plan for this, and we had to actually do this for an hour. I know what your time means, so I'm truly appreciative of all three of you. For anybody out there, find these guys on LinkedIn, connect with them. They're good people. They're willing to help. They're about community. And hopefully I'll see you guys at an event or something sometime soon, but really appreciate what you guys put into this and the time you took to help us, hopefully help some MSPs out there and guide them. But again, and also if you're looking for help for just in general, like these three gentlemen, you can reach out to myself. You can reach out to Nick Swinimer. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm not that hard to find. My picture has a goatee, so I might look a little different, but you can definitely find me on LinkedIn, Facebook, whatever. And I am here for MSPs in general. So you'll never get a sales pitch from me. I believe in Todyl. That's why I'm here. But I also believe heavily in the community, and any way I can help, I'm more than happy to do that. So thanks, everybody. Appreciate your time. Thank you to Todyl for helping us put this thing on and get it out there. And this will be recorded, and we will be getting it out so people can consume it later on. Thanks very much.
Thanks so much.